In this video, we're going to be looking at some of the best traps from the English opening. This opening starts with c4, e5. Both players will typically bring out the knights. And here, this isn't as common, but sometimes black will choose to fianchetto with g6 with the idea to play bishop g7 and use the nice long diagonal. White should immediately take advantage of this semi-passive move and play d4. Black is, of course, going to take. But rather than taking back, which allows bishop g7, which is exactly what black wants, and now the bishop is really powerful, white should play knight d5. And the idea behind this is to essentially possibly give up the pawn in the future with just e3 and like bishop takes in exchange for some pretty aggressive chances. Something like bishop g5 to attack the queen is pretty powerful, or bishop f4 to attack c7 is also pretty good. Let's say black plays bishop g7 for now, just to defend the pawn. Like I mentioned, bishop g5 is very strong. Now, of course, the queen is trapped, so black has three options to defend. f6, knight blocks this way, or knight blocks this way, or knight f6. Now, let's look at one option that loses first, and that is knight g to e7. This loses due to knight takes d4, which looks like it's just giving up a piece, but of course, knight takes back is met with bishop takes e7, the queen's trapped. The assumption is that your opponent's probably going to see this, and rather than that, they're going to play bishop takes. However, this is met with a really nice queen sacrifice, queen takes, and if black takes back the queen, this is a forced checkmate in two with the knight and the bishop. So that is what happens if black plays knight g to e7. What happens if they play, for example, f6? Well, bishop f4, as I mentioned earlier, is really powerful. Now there's the dual threat on c7. If they play d6 to try and block this threat by shutting out the bishop, just knight takes. d4 is really good, and white is just leading on development and central control. If they try and play like f5 and try and be sneaky with the discovery, well, knight b5, and now you can't guard c7 at all. Another possible move that you might see is knight c to e7. However, I just recommend knight takes d4, and this is pretty comfortable for white. If black wants to take, then you just take back, of course, and this pin is not very pleasant at all for black. So now let's look at the second trap, the same opening, with the same development as the knights, but in this case, white is going to fianchetto on the king side with g3 rather than black. Again, knights, but here, kind of not very common, but you might see it in your games, is bishop to b4. The idea here is for black to take and then push with e4. This is a pretty aggressive sideline that you may see, but rather than even allowing black to do that, white can play knight d5 and look to trade off this bishop. Black is, of course, going to take back, and now, of course, the knight is under attack. But let's say black tries to be smart and says, you attack me, I'll attack you back with e4. This is just winning for white. White takes, black takes, and now there's a nice move, queen b3. Now this is hard to see if you didn't know about this trap. However, it is extremely effective as it is more or less a forced win. Let's say black continues to take with the idea of taking the bishop in exchange for this bishop. Well, white can just take back, which is the thing. Now, let's say black moves the bishop back, right? Well, now you take this, and there's this fork, of course. If, I don't know, black is trying to be smart and pin it, well, now you got queen e3, which is really nice, with check, step siding the pin, and if they play like bishop e7, now you just take and you're up an entire bishop, and with a fairly comfortable position, right? The other option is that maybe they, after queen b3, they might play like a5. Well, now you just play a3, and then now they're forced to drop their bishop somewhere. If they put it on d6, same story as before. Now, what is the best thing that black can do? Well, you might think that it's bishop e7, because after c takes, there's no like queen e3 after rook b8, right? But white can just take the bishop now, and if black, I don't know, takes here, then white trades the additional queen and then takes the rook and is up a rook and a bishop, completely winning in a pretty dominant endgame. The best thing, according to the computer analysis, for black to do after queen b3 is simply to just castle and just abandon the bishop and then take. I mean, this is still not necessarily completely crushing for white. I mean, there are chances for black maybe, but if you're moderately good at chess, then you can probably hold this with just like castles and then dropping the bishop back and then playing like d3 and then developing the bishop, etc., and then trading off into a winning endgame. Now, all these traps have been for white. Let's look at a trap for black. So same opening and the exact same line as we saw before with g3, bishop b4, d5, just like before. And we know that after takes, that e4 is not good for black, right? Let's say black learned from their mistakes and instead chooses to play knight d4, right? And just leave this pawn alone. Now, white could just take this knight and trade and then play like something like queen b3. That's possible. However, you might notice that, of course, now this pawn is hanging on e5. But this also allows queen to e7, which is a really nice move. Now, let's say, I don't know, white plays something like knight d3 to trade off the bishop. Well, you just hung mate in one because, of course, this pawn is pinned with the queen and the king is just trapped. It's a really nice smothered mate on move 8. So obviously white is probably not going to want to do that. And let's say after queen e7, they try and defend the knight, right, with something like f4. Well, now there's d6, and the knight still has to move out of the way. Now, if white can play d3, and knight f3 is not winning because there is, of course, king f2 with the luft, and the bishop is under attack. So this is very logical. However, there's this really nice move, queen to e4. And now the rook is under attack, of course. If they play like rook g1, there is a really, really nice move. It's even better than before. And that's queen to e3, taking advantage of this pin with the bishop. Say they go back, for example, and just try and repeat back and forth. Well, now, just like before, knight to f3. This is checkmate because the luft here is cut off. I mean, just look at how nice this mate is with the knight, queen, and bishop, and all the pins on everything, because this pawn is pinned, of course, and then white can't take the queen because this pawn is pinned. It's just a really, really beautiful mate for black. I hope you guys enjoyed this video on the top 3 traps from the English opening. Thanks for watching.